Hello and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection with your hosts Chuck Randolph and Chris Story. Our goal is to engage the greater protection community, inspire innovative thought, and as always, continue the conversation around all things close protection. Let's see what the guys are talking about this time.
Greetings and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection. My name is Chuck Randolph, and across the digital divide is the demotic Mr. Chris Story. Not the demonic.
I was going to say, why am I demonic? What is happening?
It is October Shop Talk.
Why are you spreading the haterade?
No haterade. The demotic Mr. Chris Story. How you doing, man? You look like you're somewhere. I don't know where. Perhaps an unknown location, a black site.
Yeah. Undisclosed location. Yeah, no.
I was hoping for the Bane voice.
Oh, I can only do that. That's next week. So no. I'm in Nevada.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where all players go.
That's right. Yeah, three areas to play: Reno, Vegas, and Area 51.
Did you shoot a man in Reno just to watch him die?
Well, I will neither confirm nor deny shooting people to watch them die.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Hey, man, when we're getting ready to make the move to CICP Studios, Texas, and when we do, and you make your way down there, I will take you to an awesome Johnny Cash bar, nice. Mean-Eyed Cat, which is great. Been there with several friends of the show before, but really nice bar.
That they don't take credit cards. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. I've always paid cash, so maybe I'm sure every place takes credit cards now, man. It's COVID. Nobody wants to touch your nasty money.
That's right. That's funny.
Man. Well, it's October. It's Shop Talk. There is a lot of stuff that has been going on. In fact, we kind of penciled through some things that we'll save for another time. But let's say we just dive right into it, Chris.
Yeah, let's jump in. And I think I know we have a list of things, but I want to throw an ad in as well.
Of course.
An ad lib. Do you want me to go first with that or second?
Audible, do it.
So the Audible is, I think it's important, is the plane crash in Houston, which was a small jet that burned to the ground after its crash landing, but miraculously everybody lived. Right. But I think why this is important for protectors is because, at least in the corporate space and across, probably across multiple, segments of the EP industry, folks are looking at private air or smaller, chartered aircraft as options because it's from a COVID perspective, it's abundantly safer. Right. And those protocols allow them to travel, and then they're finding that traveling in that way is probably a better option. As we find with those things, though, it's usually in some way, shape, or form, pilot error, or as we see, most CEO deaths, at least not unfortunate CEOs, but most CEO deaths are usually small aircraft pilot error, and it's usually that CEO that's piloting the aircraft that is overconfident in their skills or whatever the case is, and has a fatal accident. So I think it's important to note, right? I mean, that is a significant impact, or significant consideration when you're looking at using private and chartered air. Just something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, it's this plane I think was an MD-87, and there was 18 people that were on their way to watch some baseball. Protectors for sure, whether you're somebody that's supporting a corporate entity, or or it's a chartered, true as a chartered flight. I mean, a lot of corporations have their own aviation departments, or you're
Mhm.
covering down on one of the multiple charter airs that are available.
Mhm.
I never think it's bad to ask for maintenance records and training records as part of a regular governance. Whether you're part of the corporate team, you just say it's part of our regular governance. Just like you'd want us, if you were covering down on a brand new team that had weapons, you'd say, hey, I want to see the training records.
Right.
I want to see how often we're also, taking care of these things. So I think I think it's a good audible call on that one, Chris, and it is a good thing for folks to remember. I mean, don't, you know, this is not you and I saying pilots are professional, quite the opposite, but that doesn't, there's nothing wrong with checking the small things.
Well, I would say, regardless of asking for them, I would say, if you're responsible for a corporate program or any of the other type that's using private air, that it becomes a compliance requirement for your
Mm-hmm.
organization. So that way you're just not, you're not like, hey, can I check it out? You're like, nope. Just like you would with an ARM program, you would require that those
Mm-hmm.
records be present, and part of a quarterly frequency or whatever that would be, and then that holds everybody accountable to not only regulation but licensing and all that other maintenance, et cetera, and you're able to make better decisions off of that. So, anyways, I thought
Yep.
it was interesting.
No, and it's a good thing to check. I mean, we get caught up on, it's always the small and it's always the detail, small things that will come up, and it's the things that we don't see. So that's a good reminder to check the small things, or always, I guess, sweat the small stuff.
Right. Yep.
Here's something else we
What do they
saw.
say? Isn't that actually that's later in the thing, right? But I think that's one of the tenets that Colin Powell had. Always look at the small things, right?
Yep. Well, and
I'm paraphrasing.
General Powell passed away, or Secretary of State Powell retired, passed away. I think significant because I know a lot of folks, a lot of folks I know worked for him. I had the opportunity to work for him off and on multiple times, but he is one of those protectees that always took time for the team. Was always gracious, was a good leader. Was a learned leader. He even talked to later in his life how he managed, and he learned from his earlier mistakes and failures and got better. And he had his 13 rules of leadership, and I think it was number 8 as I'm looking here, which was check small things.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was a good guy to work for. I remember I had a detail with him, and he had just come out of U.S. military, DOD, and he was in his first retirement stint. And the plane lands, and I'm like, "Sir, welcome to wherever. How are you doing?" He's like, "I'm fine. The pilot was 5 minutes late." And I thought to myself, "Here we go." But then, as he furthered away from the DOD, and then he went to state, and he came out of state, I mean, he changed and his ways changed. But something else he said that I always liked was like, remain calm and be kind,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
you just don't know.
Yeah.
But
My limited interactions were in uniform, and then post. I don't think he was retired from everything at the time, but he was invited to a party, and he was kind of lit up like a Christmas tree in the right front seat of the limo that they were in, and he rolls up, and I'm controlling, uh, the very limited, parking for the top 3,
mm-hmm.
in the, in the U.S. And he's like, "Hey, you know who I am?" I'm like, "I'm familiar, sir." He's like, "We want to get dropped off right there." I'm like, "You go right ahead." Pretty funny.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah.
He told me a story once. He was asking me what I thought about law enforcement folks working off duty, and I was like, well, are they ever, can you really ever be off duty? He was like, that's my point exactly. And he told me a story about 2 guys that were driving him, and for some odd reason on one of the guys' radio, it came across like an APB. They were a bolo for somebody, and the individual happened to like run across the street. So they pulled over. Both guys got out of the car and ran off after this guy and left him in the car. He was like, I didn't know what to do. Should I get up and drive? He's like, I was like, well, what did you do, sir? He's like, oh, I just sat there and waited. He's like, they eventually came back.
Yeah.
But also one of those protectees, Chris, that like would stop and say, hey, I need to thank everyone. Sometimes you're like, hey, it'd be great if you could just keep going because there's a big crowd here. But, he would always stop, thank people, thank staff, thank people who helped him, not just protectees, but, the young lady maybe who was cleaning his green room or something, always was gracious and quick to take a picture or quick to say thank you. So we mourn the passing, and fair winds, General Powell, and hope you're doing exciting things on the other side.
He's probably just walking his dog. He's probably tired of doing exciting things. Actually, he's just like, freaking, I'm just going to chill out for a little bit.
He told me that when he got out of DOD, he was like, this is how much I was used to being handled. So he gets out of DOD and he's driving. I think it's like an old Volvo that his family had. He's driving, down the Beltway, runs out of gas. Because he was like, I never thought to fill up my car with gas. It was always just full. So along comes like the handy helper or whatever you call him. The guy gives him like 2 gallons of gas, or just enough gas that's supposed to get you off the highway to a gas station. So like, thanks to the guy, shakes his hand, starts driving, runs out of gas again. He was like, I didn't realize they only gave me. He's like, I thought they like filled my tank, and I was like, oh, sir. And he's like, I know. He's like, so now I always make sure my car's filled up. But
Nice.
also, I mean, just one of those protectees that had good stories and was interactive, and also was demanding though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, like those goes to some of his rules that he was, demanding of more from people, right? And I think the thing that again, we laugh about those stories about being handled and like, come on, bro, you can't freaking, what do you do? But at the end of the day, it's about that handling piece is about reducing the amount of decisions and the things they have to worry about so they can think about, larger level, global issues, not whether your freaking tank's full of gas or not, or what you need from the grocery store. So I think
I would say
that's a distinction.
The Joint Chief, we need him thinking about. I'm happy to make sure the car is full so that he can consider larger geostrategic issues. Maybe I'm okay with that. Well,
Maybe the Secretary of State also, just going to throw that out there.
I'm going to say it's cool. He doesn't need to be worried about the Starbucks or the Tim Hortons or whatever he's getting in the morning. But
right.
I'll go through his 13 rules real quick. Number 1, it ain't as bad as you think. It will look better in the morning. Number 2,
that could apply to a lot of things if you think about it. Like STDs. Freaking.
I'm sure that's not
problems.
what he had in mind, but
You never know. You never know. He was a soldier for a very long time.
Number 2, get mad, then get over it. The first part of that's easy. The second part maybe is harder to do.
Yeah.
Number 3, avoid having your ego so close to your position that when your position falls, your ego goes with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really big one, and I think you could adjust that to not even if just falls, but if it transitions, right? I think that's what a lot of folks have they identify as, right?
Oh, yeah, we've talked about it here before. I mean, you identify as a protector, you identify as part of your career, and at some point you've got to have you. And I know people might be watching, going, "Well, that is me." Well, I guarantee there's someone else inside there that.
And let me, Jesus, freaking powered my chair down way too far. But I think I think I don't mean identify as, I mean, because that sounds a little bit freaking in the moment, if you will. But I mean, that is your identity, right? That ego role is your identity, and that's what lets you down. So I think that's a great.
I mean, you can identify as a protector, but I think as he says here, but your position, you can still be a protector and your position moves, or your transition, like you said, transition to somewhere else. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was just trying to stay away from that. identify as, you can say, identify as a, 13-year-old Asian, freaking chess phenomenon. But you're a 52-year-old man. No, that's what I identify as. That's what I'm trying to say.
You're so off the radar right now. Number 4, it can be done. Number 5, be careful what you choose. You may get it. So maybe
Your choices.
Maybe your choice will lead you to some science experiment where you are a young chess player.
Nice.
Number 6, don't let adverse facts stand in the way of a good decision. I've always liked that one.
Yeah, that is a really good one.
Especially in today's day and age. Number 7, you can't make someone else's choices. You shouldn't let someone else make yours. Good words to live by.
Control your destiny. Yep.
Number 8, check small things. We were just talking about that in terms of the aircraft, but I think that's a good life lesson as well. It's always those small things that are going to get you. Number 9, I think this is huge. Share credit, especially if you're a leader. I think if you're a leader, your job is to pass credit and take on the failures. 10, remain calm, be kind. 11, this sits with him for sure. Have a vision, be demanding. 12, don't take counsel of your fears or naysayers. That can be a difficult one at times. And then, of course, 13, perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. So
if you notice, almost every other one of those ties back to a previous one, right? Mm-hmm. Just interesting. Anyways, great rules of leadership. Regardless of where you sit, they kind of apply across the board.
Yeah. So again, fair winds, General Powell. We had some more movement or some more activity in Haiti, and that's something you and I have been talking about and tracking quite a bit. So, what do we have going on there?
Well, I think the big thing is the kidnapping of the 17 or so Canadian and American missionaries, and part of this is, on one hand is, okay, great. What is the Haitian response? What is the U.S. response? Slow news day. At some places this might not even register. But on the other hand, from my perspective, right? I mean, house of worship security is one of the segments of protection. So why are we not considering this in a country that has not only has problems historically, but is in crisis? And you want to go do great things, but how do you not consider your own security when you're down? How do you not consult? It's just, at some point you have some level of ownership and liability, right? Like, how often do we hear of some missionary somewhere having to be pulled out of fire because they didn't take, the conditions on the ground, into account, or as serious as they should, or whatever the case is. It's okay to protect yourself and the folks you're with while you're doing whatever benevolent work you're doing, and we just have to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah, I think I was looking as we were prepping for today, and I think the Center of Analysis and Research for Human Rights, which I believe is a local Haiti nonprofit, said there were 119 kidnappings recorded for the first half of October.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
Just this month, and this is a problem that's been, the situation in Haiti has been a problem for a long time. And, I agree with you completely. I mean, I understand the missionary work, and that is probably the sixth slice of the protection industry. And I think, if we're looking at resources to protect folks that are worshiping on a Sunday or a Saturday or Wednesday at their house of worship, we definitely need to be looking at what they're doing when they travel overseas as well. I mean, right. I do understand, like, hey, look, we want to go with a different type of image, but this is something that has to be considered. I mean, I've always believed, like, if you openly go into a high risk area and you don't have, and your lifeline probably needs to be a little bit more than just the local. Having said that, I understand resources and everything, and people go wide open into what they're doing. But now you have American missionaries who are, high value targets. And what are they asking for? $17 million for the release
Right.
of these people.
1 million per, right? And I think here's the funny thing is, I don't know what, like, Haiti looks like Somalia right now, right? And also, they assassinated, or their president was assassinated, right? So that's a high risk environment, pretty, just off of our borders, as is Mexico and and or areas of Mexico, and I get it, right? You want to roll in there seeing a kumbaya, but at what risk, And I think that we just need to freaking, unscrew that just a little bit,
It's interesting too, because when I was reading some of the reports, one of the things I noted was that the kidnappers or the bandits were wearing uniforms from the central management of the Haitian Judicial Police. So
Right.
when you say it's Somalia, it is back to crazy antics where I would trust no one.
Right.
I saw in one of the reports that there was pastors or somebody were saying that they were afraid to give last rites at funerals for fear that they would just get scooped up in the middle of the day. So, I'm all for helping. I'm all for NGO work. I'm all for whatever we can do to help others and help other nations. But I'm also all for doing it smartly. And if we're going to go in eyes wide open, let's go in with a plan. And
right.
Or have exercised the plan. And maybe in this case there is. I mean, we don't know what we don't know. We can only speculate on what we see. But this is going to continue to be a problem, I think, especially in Haiti, and especially post assassination.
Right. Well, but one of the news reports said that I guess kidnapping Americans in Haiti used to be very, very rare. Now it's becoming increasingly common.
Yeah.
So not helpful.
Well, you have the
read a book or read a intel report.
well,
It's just frustrating, right? Like, this is all preventative.
Yeah.
All of it is.
And I think since we have the assassination, we have the earthquake, and now we've had terrible weather. I mean, you're looking at a near total collapse of civil order and complete unrest. I mean, I've not been to Haiti is one of the few countries I've not been to, but we've had folks on the podcast talking about it before. But I mean, it's just it's also a plan. I mean, it's also one of those moments, and I know we've got people out down there right now that are in harm's way and have been kidnapped, and we hope for their safe return. But this is a good thing if you sit around with your team and say, hey, what if that was our folks? Or what if, let's run through the numbers and make sure that if it was us, do we have all the plans in place?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not just on the protector side. If you're a risk leader, do we have if those were our folks or we had employees there, we had something, let's run through the numbers and use that scenario as something that we can work from.
I agree.
So definitely Haiti continues to be something we watch on the show and we'll continue to report out on for sure. Speaking of things we've reported out on before, Chris, we have had another attack and a death of an MP in the UK, Sir David Ames, was at his normal Friday meeting. It is my understanding that as part of Parliament, you're asked to go and meet with, excuse me, some of your constituents. He did it normally on Fridays, and he would do it from a church or other places. And he went to the church. He was attacked by an individual, stabbed multiple times, and then died as a result of the stabbing.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things kind of come to bear here is that the unintended consequence, right, of the knife attacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
By banning guns and all the things, and that's not political. It's just those are just facts, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if I think at one point they're considering banning knives, so it'll be hammers or bowling pins or whatever the next object is. But I think it's interesting that they're they believe that they're all targets now after this. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the piece is that when do we start to understand, at least from a threat intelligence perspective, why do people have to be kidnapped, killed, hurt, whatever, for us to at least manage the threat appropriately so that these lives don't have to be lost, right? I mean, I get the budget gets a vote, but it doesn't mean that everybody needs a 3-car motorcade, So, they're looking at those threat levels, et cetera, but it's unfortunate again that these things have to happen. And of course, it's not a crystal ball, right? I
Right.
mean, again, and I don't have all of the, I don't have all the facts, right? And all I know is that the guy was stabbed, and of course there's some facts that are withheld so that, to protect, the other MPs. But again, it's just sad and frustrating. And again, after the fact, threat levels raise, then we start taking it seriously. And especially in a time, as we talk about more of these items this week, is a time of increased threat, a time of increased risk, a time of increased stress. We just have to start looking at this a little bit more seriously.
Well, the Joint Terrorism Analysis Center over in the UK previously had the risk level for the MPs deemed as moderate, meaning attacks are possible but not likely. Obviously, that
Right.
they've made a change in risk, and now they've elevated it based on this. I mean, you look at. I mean, we've talked about it before. You can see people have had intelligence reports on this or risk reports about, just the state of play post-COVID and post-political turmoil, in which you have further gap. And in those further gaps, I mean, you have further extremism coming online. You look at this and you think, in the UK's had this, 2 other times where you've had MPs murdered. I think you go back to season 3, it's Philip, go back and listen to Philip Grindell, and he talks about that. But, you have to look at this and think, like you said, like, what are we doing now? If you look in the U.S., post January 6th, there's more security ramping up around local politicians and, state level politicians. But you have to look at these folks. And if you're someone serving in politics, and you have to be answerable for whatever issue, I'll say a demented person may come up and bring to you. I mean, Chris, I might come up to you, and for all intents and purposes, right then and there, you are the COVID issue for me, whether I'm pro or con or whatever. But you represent everything that's there.
Right.
And you hear people like, "Oh, there's no threat to me here. Or there's no risk, or there's no that," from your point of view.
Yes. Again, that's the part
the fallacy.
That is always the fallacy that freaking just is the protector's bane, right? I mean, and I think part of that is our own doing, because we see threats under every tree, every branch, every leaf, right? But if you look at it from a actual threat perspective, you know, yes, the CEO is the chief risk officer, right? But that's not that their job is. You're the specialist, right? You're the person that's supposed to say, here's really where we're at, right? And
You're
here's
the
why
advisor.
I think that we're doing this, right?
Yeah.
And
they
so,
might be the chief risk officer, but you're the lead advisor for that.
Right.
And you should be.
That piece. Right. So again, where do you draw the line saying, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but here's what we're going to do, right? And I think that's easier in the government space because there are mandates, right? It's easier when you're running a corporate program because there may be mandates, right? If you have a board mandated protection, and that piece is, there are wills will do's, shall do's, shall not do's, right? Will not do's. And so that piece becomes a little bit easier for the protector to do their job and their role. But again, that whole threat assessment, understanding threat, and then using the assets and resources that you have at your disposal to, even protect multiple principals. What would you do? Could you reduce the threat if let's say we've got 20 MPs to look after, you and I do, right? And we've got a team of 3 of us to be able to execute that. Well, what do we do? Well, let's say we just do random protection on 2 of them a day, right? And it just shifts and moves. Do you think that would, and we're also monitoring at the highest threat, right? But if we're able to, focus on that and then do random moves and spot checks with drivers, et cetera, then you take you get inside the enemy's OODA loop, and now they've got to get lucky, right? I think there's plenty of ways to do it, but it's just freaking frustrating.
And a lot of times, I'm a big proponent of more of a covert level of protection or low key protection. I think since we're talking about the UK here, the minder type approach, but there's sometimes when it's okay to maybe throw on I'm saying old school on purpose here, tongue in cheek, throw on an earpiece or make it look more like, hey, I'm here in protection mode, because it does, it might send that person that came to do harm that says, hey, well, I don't want to deal with whatever this is, so I'm going to go away, because it's not that easy, because again, we don't know what they're thinking. Right. I do want to point out that they had and I think it was, as Phil was telling us, they had the Labor MP Joe Cox was murdered in 2016, and then they stood up additional programs. So one of the things that I was going through today and kind of reviewing stuff we had talked about before and reviewing this article and some of the articles, I remember, I think it was off mic, but Phil was telling us that they have, it was called Operation Bridger, and they have additional support in police efforts to support the MPs as a response of Joe Cox's murder in 2016. And, again, you made me think of that, because also, like, if you're listening to this and you're a protectee, what resources do you have? Maybe if you're a local politician, or you're doing work for a local politician, and, we don't have any resources, we don't have that. Well, you don't know until you look and ask.
Right.
Do an assessment. Well, I can't afford it. Well, do your own. Get somebody to help.
Well, on the flip side, if the team did go to them and said, hey, we see something different, now they're going to get all the assets and resources that they need. But again, it's unfortunate,
Yeah.
And I'm not assuming that it wasn't addressed. I'm just saying it's frustrating that how this happened,
Well, and I don't know, Chris, and I need to continue to follow this. Do we know the motive behind the attack?
I thought I had seen it before in some way, shape, or form, but I don't know.
I'm trying to remember if it was COVID based, or I think there's a lot of stress that's COVID based, or as a result of COVID, which COVID seems to exacerbate whatever issues you have already. So it doesn't surprise me that, strategically it's exacerbating everything.
Well, it's just funny that, one of the other articles after the fact was after the fact the MPs were going to get more protection. It's just again, that whole deal. So,
well,
anyway.
I think something, it kind of dovetails into another piece that we're talking about tonight that we thought was interesting, which was, the increased threats of violence against school officials and teachers.
Right.
And you saw that Justice Department thing that came out earlier this month, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I would say even 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Just the thought of people threatening school board, you'd be like, what? That doesn't make any sense, but because of this COVID piece and the mask mandates and all of these other challenges, first off, if you look at it, your local school board is accessible, or your local school board members are accessible, right? They're elected officials, so they represent, whatever is going on in your district. And of course, the COVID vaccination piece is very, very polarizing. So you're on one side of clearly just on one side or the other, and then it affects your children, which brings an emotional response and rights and all the things. So it becomes a very uh, what do you call it? A volatile issue, right? And it's at the local level, right? I mean, most places just don't have the resources to support something like that,
Well,
and easily targeted,
and
So
the state of play for risk is polarization. I mean, you said it. I mean, you're either viewed on one side of the fence or the other. And if you're even somewhat in the middle, then you want to it's almost like people want to toss you on one side or the other. And, we have a family friend who is a kindergarten teacher, and she was telling me about threats that one of her fellow teachers underwent because a parent just, simply, if you will, just kind of lost it over, I think, probably stress and homeschooling and all the other things, and basically came in and said, you got to take care of my kid, and threatened some violence against the teacher. They de-escalated it from the school, but I mean, the attorney, the AG is taking this very seriously. They're forming some task force and things to seek out and investigate threats of violence to board members and teachers alike.
Yep. Yeah, but I mean, again, that's reactive, right?
Right.
And by design, I mean, probably rightfully so. Although you've got to play whack-a-mole a little bit with some of those risks, at least provide some sense of security. But so many people so spread out, and again, those localized pockets where people can just kind of reach out and do whatever. But I think what we're seeing is, and maybe not recognizing is, we talked about the Netflix walkout, right? So I think you talked about, employee activism, right?
Yeah.
Well, now I think really what we're seeing is, I think you spoke earlier about the January 6th incursion. I don't have to. I can use air quotes, but we're on camera, so I can use
You can
incursion.
actually use them.
Yes. So we're seeing this like localized resistance, right? So on one side, you're seeing cancel culture, right? Shaming, everybody's offended by, a skunk goes across the road and somebody hits it and that person's a freaking animal murderer, whatever, right? I mean, whatever excuse we're using to further our whatever our personal agendas are, we're seeing this on both sides. And I think really what we're seeing here is against officials, or further elected officials. And then of course on the other side, you're seeing, that with the Netflix piece, you're seeing against executives, which we talked about, before, right, wrong, or indifferent. Whatever you do as a CEO, somebody on one side of the fence or the other is going to have some or pass some sort of judgment. But I think we're starting to see a lot more of this, and I think it might turn into this. We talked about that frog and boiling water, right? The heat's getting turned up, and we're starting to see more and more and more pushback, and we're not seeing this like large left versus right political thing that we saw during the election, but we're seeing localized pushback, on both sides of the fence, and it could be pretty volatile, and likely will continue to be volatile for the coming future.
So one thing I would say for protectors on this, or risk folks alike, is, if you're not familiar with like threat assessment principles or threat assessment practices, even, and you could go back to that, maybe the Phil Grindell episode and a couple others and listen, because we do talk about the FBI and some of the Secret Service stuff that's been put out. I mean, it is a good time to bone up on your threat assessment work. Because and it's also, I hesitate to use the word opportunity, but as you talk about, a lot of things are reactive. So people are going to invest post-incident because that's all they know what to do. Like, oh my gosh, something happened, let's invest in it. Right. So
that's the first thing. Well, nothing's really happened,
Yeah. But if you go back even, let's take something like grand, on a grand scale, 9/11. I mean, there's a huge investment in security across the board, corporate, otherwise, and then as further away you get from it, you kind of divest again. But I would say here, as these things are happening, look, we're seeing it in the UK, we're seeing it in the US, we're seeing it in other places. It's an opportunity for protectors maybe to help folks get left to bang, at least in terms of how they're thinking about their safety and security. Like, hey, at schools, if you're a school board member, have we talked about this? Oh, that's all crazy security talk. Well, okay, let's put a different word on it. Have we talked about our safety? It was, how long did it take us until we started talking about active shooter, or as I like to call it, active murder issues, and now we have these localized, even down to the individuals, as we've seen with the MP and some of these threats to school. It's an opportunity for protectors to get out there and help advise, get people thinking, about, behavioral threat assessment and other activities like that.
Right. Well, I think the other thing is that if you look at, and again, using COVID as an example, because I think that's, it's extremely polarizing. So as you look at that, people are frustrated to the point, and you look at numbers, right, where they'll leave phone calls and voicemails and emails and these digital trails, and in volume, right?
Yeah.
So you look at the howler population is everything starts with a grievance. So that howler is, everybody's howling, right? So with the increase in the howler population, obviously there's going to be an increase in the hunter population, right? And they're just looking and waiting and going, you know what, Leroy Jenkins, I'm going to do it live. And you may not be able to get an understanding of who that is, where they are, where they're coming from, but understanding the difference in the threat, from email perspective, increase in percentage, the threats in phones, the threats in this. There's an accompanying level of there's accompanying level of action that coincides with that you need to be prepared for. And I think that's really what we're talking about.
Well, and then, and making those plans. So when those folks go silent, the ones that are howling when they do go silent, and understanding those triggers. I mean, there's a lot to be done there. And again, there's opportunities for protectors to get involved and help reduce risk. And, and not all protections about, hey, I want to head to Africa, or like we said earlier, I'm going to go down to Haiti. Localized risk means localized response and localized involvement. So Chris, I'm going to throw in a plug. We don't get any money for this, by the way, but we're ATAP members. And if you're not, ATAP puts out a pretty good journal every, I think it's every quarter or every month, Journal of Threat Assessment and Management. I mean, I won't lie, it can be dry at some times, but it's a pretty good magazine or periodical if you can get your hands on it. I think if you're an ATAP member, you get it automatically. If not, you can subscribe to it. But if you go out to the ATAP website, Journal of Threat Assessment and Management, like even the one that I got for September that I think you and I were talking before we turned the cameras on, stalking of professionals, a scoping review. And they've also got an article on this one regarding association of school climate with willingness to report threats of violence. So, always something interesting in there for the threat assessment side of the protector's brain.
Well, I think I think you hit the nail on the head, right? From a protector perspective, if you have the capability, skill set, and knowledge, threat assessment is where the threat assessment is where everything starts, right? So, you may not see a 53-car motorcade moving the school board in and out, but during the area, times of the increased risk, which is, I'd say when all of the school board is together, that might be a hint. Those are the things that you might look at, right, and just offer realistic approaches to those things. I mean, but there's a lot going on, and I think there's another resource that we put or promote as well, which comes out twice a week, which is twice a month, the Executive Threat Watch by Rich Pettinger and his crew. It's valuable to understand the trends right? Just by volume of what's going on and why those things are happening. I think it becomes very important to understand what those are.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're a protector and it's important to follow all the things that are important or sacrosanct if you want to be cool guy about it to what we do. I mean, threat assessment's one of them, advanced work, keeping up on what the latest risks are and threats too. I mean, it's it's so much more than halls and walls,
Yep.
And it's going to keep getting more complex, which a good
I agree.
example of that would be our next article, which is Chris, did you see the family office regulation in the Pandora Papers
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
rising risk? It was in Forbes magazine. I posted
Right.
it on LinkedIn earlier this week, and this is one of those articles I came across, and I think I sent a text to you um, about it, because these are one of these things that I think these what I would say like a quiet issue that we need to monitor,
Mm-hmm.
because you were talking about COVID and we're talking about polarization of, let's just say in this case, haves and have nots. And now you
Right.
have, ultra high net worth individuals. And I think, what was it? You reminded me before we started recording that, and we had talked about this last year or a couple of years ago, the Panama Papers,
Mm-hmm.
where somebody leaked that offshore, those emails and information from that offshore company, and all of a sudden you have these ultra high net worth individuals, information out there for people to read.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a similar issue going on again. And as a result of that, they're talking about potential greater scrutiny and regulation, which has been a topic off and on for years. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you, but for people like you and I and protectors out there, regardless of maybe how we might feel personally, I mean, these are the folks that were charged to manage risk around.
Mm-hmm.
And this
Well, yeah, I mean,
represents,
and I think whether you're on the list or not, right, your risk is increased. I mean, um, not only those named entities that are, suddenly the risk went up because the have-nots, right, can point and go, see, I told you, right, they're hiding money or whatever the case is, and then of course those who just appear to have, right, or those who are just known as high net worth, right, they get lumped in from those, those essentially those same folks who are the social justice warriors, right? This shouldn't be happening, and all the things, and it some level it's a little bit of job security, but you know that level of awareness needs to increase along with and expand again beyond that 15 yards. Say, hey, bro, I'm the body guy. You got to know what's coming down the pike and how people are looking at not just your principal, but the class system that your principal is in. That makes
right.
sense.
Well, in this case, to put some perspective for the folks that maybe haven't caught up or haven't found this news article yet, it happened, they started publishing earlier this month at the beginning of October. And I just looked up to make sure I got the numbers right. There's approximately just under 12 million leaked documents.
Yeah, it's a couple.
So yeah, that's a few pages. It's like almost 3 terabytes of information that's
Mm-hmm.
out there. And I think, just to make sure I get this right, in total, approximately 35 current former national leaders, 400 public officials from nearly 100 countries, and more than 100 billionaires.
Yeah,
Some of the
so it's
files go back
interesting.
to the late 60s and
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to, I think, 2020. But you bring up a good point, Chris. When you see, when you see these things and that's in the class of the individual that you're protecting, first off, are my protectees in there? If not, are anyone that's in kind of the same vein as my protectees or what they do? Okay,
Right.
what
Or
does
do
it
we use
mean?
some of the same services, right? I mean, do we use the
Yeah.
same service provider, right? I mean, there's risk there, you know? Continue. I just wanted before you
No,
get too
no.
far
I
down the
mean,
road.
absolutely. I mean, it's almost like in intelligence, you have link analysis, or maybe if you're doing work in governance where you get where you have sanctions, and you have to do that link analysis and say, okay, here's Chris, here's all the things around him, and you have to do almost like a quick link analysis. Or if you're fortunate enough to have some intel folks in your purview, you can say, hey, look, here's these folks, or anybody touch any of our folks, what do we need to know and think about? Um, are you going to go in and pull these papers down? Are you going to? No, but this just becomes one more requirement in the prioritizing requirements that we have to add to our monitoring and add to our rating, so we can understand, what does this mean? They're talking about potential governance again. What does that mean? It's
Well, it's interesting that the thought process is that it will never happen, right? I mean, that's the thought process. I think that a lot of people, right, wrong, and different, that
Mhm.
people will take, well, they're the rich, they're never going to get regulated, right? And this is the proof, right? This is the Pandora paper, the Panama Papers, and then the Pandora Papers are the proof that it's not happening. What I
Mhm.
found interesting about the Forbes article was that they talked about reputational risks. But if you
Yeah.
look at some of the photos that you had people protesting that. It's not difficult to figure out where, named billionaire number one lives and
Mhm.
protest against them, or, block their road, or block the drive to the entrance to their residence, right? Or their work, or whatever the case is. And suddenly you're in this kind of, oh shit, I didn't see that coming moment, which isn't helpful. So
Yep.
I think for those folks who are, in the high net worth space and the CEO space. And I think it's also interesting that you talked about this head of state versus versus billionaires, right? Not every head of state is a billionaire,
Nope.
but they're able to, um, let's say,
They they all
squirrel away
yeah, they all yeah.
hide some wealth, if you will, and they all have power, right? So it's not just because you're a billionaire. You could, what was it? I think isn't it a meme going around? It's like, look, and it's interesting. Like, I don't want to investigate. I don't need to investigate billionaires who turn politicians' tax return. I need to investigate a politician who turned multimillionaires' tax return, right? I
That's
mean,
actually a good
again, it
point.
just goes to show you what power does, right? So I think that regardless of what segment you're in, if this impacts you in any way, shape, or form, you need to take a look at it, because the reputational risk can manifest into physical ones.
And these are also, if you're, if you're one of those folks and you're involved in a program where, like, I have protections on my radar, but I'm not doing we're not doing a lot of like body person protection. Well, you definitely need to look at these things, because how many times,
Right.
Chris, stop me if you've heard this before. Nobody knows me. I'm low key. Nobody's going to know I'm here. Sure, sir. Understand. No
Yeah.
problem, ma'am. I've got it.
And that can change in a heartbeat.
Right. Something like this comes out, and all of a sudden, hey, Chris, you're in the Panama Papers, and I didn't know you had, this much money in an offshore account, and you were doing these other things. And, oh, by the way, somebody then traces that back to maybe monies that you've given to organization X or Y that could be seen as a left or a right-leaning organization. And now we're in a place in society where everyone needs to attach something to something. And all I see is a bunch of risk cards being thrown down everywhere that
Right.
we're going to
Right.
have to deal with.
Or, you know what? We're not going to be able to get to that person because it's known that they have security. But you know who we can get to? That person who thinks they're unknown, right?
Yep.
That represent, the CEO of name your company that flies below the radar, that's not a very public personality, that is accessible, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's all the risk all the time. I'm just saying that suddenly, if in a crowd somebody goes, "We're going streaking," right?
Yeah.
Then that's what happens, right? I mean, at least one guy's going to go streaking, and his wife's going to pick him up, and he wants to go to Taco Bell, or sorry, Kentucky Fried Chicken. But
Well,
you know where I'm headed with
here,
that.
here's kind of a very like generic thought process on that. Think about toilet paper in the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, that things have a way of taking a life on of their own, and it's and yeah, look, I come from an information operations background in the military, and of course, there's you can have nation states that are trying to stir the pot or do whatever for whatever reason. That's a whole nother conversation, and maybe we bring our friends in from Business of Intel on that. But accidental misinformation can also have very unfortunate unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Whoops. I meant to put Colin Powell's address on it, but I accidentally put Chris Story's address on it. And all of a sudden you have people showing up at your house to do harm or protest or bring flowers because of a mistake.
Right. And the momentum reaches critical mass where they're not going to be like, well, hey, he's not here, or you have the wrong address. And they're like, no, we don't. And at that point, you've got those people who are intent on causing issues, specific issues. But then you've got the folks that are just there to cause destruction no matter what's happening. And then you've got those people who are influenced by the rest of them. And those are smaller. I'm sorry, those numbers increase as you move with the crowd. And then suddenly, the guy or gal that's like, 10 people deep and 40 people wide has no idea why they're lighting a match, but it's freaking awesome.
Yep.
Right. And suddenly you're in a freaking, people are just like, burn it to the ground, and it's happening. With the riots, right? With the riots, like some of those people never intended to do that.
You can see them. I mean, if you're a watcher of protests, peaceful protests, I mean, hey, I get it. We have a nation that's built on the ability to have a say and peaceful say, but you can see almost sometimes, I've watched the Seattle protests many times, the May Day stuff and all that, and you can see almost at dusk, I call them the vampires, kind of pop up in the background, and you can see them 1, 2, 4, 8. And then that's the time, in the daytime, you see parents maybe with their kids and, teaching, peaceful protests, whatever. But then that dusk starts happening. You see those folks waiting, and you're right. They're just agents of destruction. I don't care. I just want to get out there and get my burn on.
Yeah. Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah. So, I think, just more things to look at in terms of that larger threat picture that we need to examine. And not every, and if you think about it, and we're not done yet, but we ran a gamut of, hey, we have kidnappings tonight. We had, people who are maybe not in the right mindset, attacking local politicians. We now have teachers, people who are helping our kids, learn and prosper, getting pointed at. And now we have, on the flip side, we have just more potential unrest happening with release of papers. And that's not you or I saying what our political opinion is. It doesn't matter. I mean, as protectors, these are all things that we have to monitor.
Right. I mean, especially if you look at the protector on both sides, it's like, has anybody asked? I mean, maybe they have, I don't know, but I've not seen a call go out, hey, okay, that's actually not true. I have seen calls go out for, hey, probably better if you're more conservative, right? For this client, right? I've seen that. I haven't really seen the, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I haven't seen, hey, you've got to be really left-leaning protector. I haven't seen that at all. But again, at the end of the day, you're saying that, whatever your daily rate is or whatever you're doing, that you're saying, hey, my role is to tip the scales to make sure that this person, has their voice, has their, whatever it is that they do. And that's that agnostic role that protectors play in providing protection. Or you say, I can't accept the job. I can't in good conscience, protect this person. I might be a threat, at least of, popping a Xanax in their mouth so they freaking stop talking or something. But those are choices that you have to make as protectors. So you have to look at all those threat vectors in the environment that you're in.
Well, shifting vectors to the digital, lest we not talk about some of that. I saw something that came out on the Cyber Scoop, which is something I subscribe to. I really enjoy the stuff they put out, especially in cyber. It's well written. It's usually timely. They put something out where Brandon Wales, who's the executive director of Homeland Security's cyber side, CISA, said that and I quote, "We continue to see democratization of malicious cyber capabilities. Today, hacking tools can be purchased for use by any criminal, regardless of expertise, or even rented to provide as a service capability." And then he went on to talk about how nation states are investing significantly in tools to target networks, to include SCADA systems and other supply chain things. Now, obviously we're not a cyber podcast, but we don't shy away from it in any shape or form. And we, in fact, encourage protectors everywhere to get their cyber on or get their digital feed on at least once or twice a week to understand these threats, because these are things that affect our working environment. Right. To include this new hybrid work from home, because any of, these hacking tools and these things that can be, air quotes here, purchased off the shelf can be turned around and utilized by a lot of folks. And, digital weaponization of digital tools is really it allows everyone to play in the game, if you get my meaning. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, CISA, for those who don't know, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, that's a big deal, right? I mean, I think, not many of us are going to come across folks that are doing business with Iran and North Korea. I mean, just going to throw that out there, but a lot of us, regardless of almost the segment that we're in, will have people that are doing business, in China, Russia, and Korea, which is close, or other organizations that are supported by, or I'm sorry, other countries that are supported by those countries, or propped up, if you will, third party, and so it becomes this increasingly dangerous from a intellectual property perspective, ransomware, just especially as the Internet of Things continues to expand, which is more opportunities for people to weasel their way into your network and all of the secret or all the secrets, right? The keys to the castle, if you will. All of this, I think, the next thing that we'll start to see is this collective approach and a converged approach, if you will, between the digital space and the physical space to, and walking down the hallway, cool, shut off the next set of lights. Okay, great. Those are set off. Shut the cameras on. Great. Those are set off. If you can't get whatever you need remotely, you'll get it physically. And if you can't do one or the other, then you'll use both to get everything. And I think, just like you talked about, that working from home piece is just taking all of those protections that you had when everybody was behind those, the four walls or the physical space of the organization, and now we've just send on the access points, right?
Think about it. Yeah, access points and endpoints. I mean, they're all over the place now, and now ransomware attacks are just off the charts now. I remember a couple of years ago talking to somebody at a conference, and they were trying to tell me that ransomware attacks were a thing of the past. We needed to worry about these other things, and I thought to myself, like, never will be a thing of the past. It's ransomware. It's easy, and just like we were talking before. Hey, okay, I'm not gonna kidnap your missionaries. I'm just gonna kidnap your missionary network so that you can't get any funding to do your missionary work, and I'll just ask for a scant $1 million from your church to unlock your network. A lot easier. I don't have to go toe to toe with anybody protectors. I don't have to, so these are things that we have to consider. We've talked about before here, is a greater holistic risk profile for that protectors need to think about.
Well, imagine what would happen if you just hacked and spoofed that mission donations, right? So they have all these donations, they're doing whatever, and they're using, somebody else is using that campaign to understand, to get these funds, right, and support this mission, and then they're piggybacking on your donations and piggybacking on your marketing, and then suddenly you're like, great, we're getting ready to launch this thing, God is good, great things are happening, and then suddenly you look at the bank account and it's zero.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the brand risk to that, the reputational risk to that, and the impact of that is would be devastating. And that's just one small organization. These tools allow the collection of all of that data and malware and all these offensive tools at an exponential rate. So it
Well, think
becomes
about the Twitter hack of now we're looking at what, 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, in which they went in, they were able to spoof to other folks that they were, luminaries on Twitter and got people to donate money. And I used to know, because I gave a briefing on it before, but I used to know like how much, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up and we can report back out on another episode, but like how much money these hackers made in like an hour.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, in terms of if it was a business, a return on investment, you'd want that every day because you're making incredible return on investment for the amount of work they put in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you looked at skimming or scraping, right, where folks are like, you just take a little bit off the top and nobody cares because nobody's looking at a dollar, right? And I can do that, and then now people are getting, now it's just being greedy, but not greedy because, I'm not saying they're not greedy, but what I'm saying is,
No.
if it's there for the taking, right,
They're gonna
and
take
you're not
it.
doing what needs to be done, yeah, they're just going to take it, So it's I don't know, we got to up our game.
Yeah, and I think again for protectors, it's about asking questions. You go all the way back to the audible that you called at the beginning of the show here. With the plane crash, ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
There's no wrong question to ask in terms of risk. Can you talk to me about this? Can you understand? What can you tell me? Do we have any issues here? Or the thing I think you should look at when you read cyber stuff is like, does it affect me or my protectees, and how?
Right.
Even if you're a small company, hey, what's our network look like? Oh no, we're all good. We're all on Gmail, or
How do we
we're
know?
good. And again, it's like, yeah, how do we know that? Are we resilient? What happens if, but Chris, this is all boring stuff. I don't want to talk about that. I just got a new Glock 26 that I bought from my buddy and I'm going to check it out. And I want to do blah, 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 blah. Okay. That's cool too. But what happens when you're thinking about reputations and that, reputations at scale, like, oh, great. My network, providing work all over the world for people and my network went down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean,
Oops.
I think, so it's interesting in this article that kind of talked about like all the protections and how they, really focused on the, touting what the administration was doing and how it was being done, et cetera. And then yet there was another article which I thought was, I kind of followed it from its inception, where I think it was the Department of the Air Force had said, "Hey, we have this gap in technology and cyberspace and understanding it, and so we don't have the capability in-house within the Air Force to lead us into the future. So we're going to recruit from outside," and they pulled in some cyber ninja from wherever, and they gave him. I mean, they did a really. I mean, I thought it was really forward leaning on their part, where they gave him a great title and authority and the mandate to get it done, and then he recently resigned his position, saying, "Yeah, we're screwed," and they don't get it, and we're really behind the power curve. I think one of the terms in the article I remember specifically was elementary school level, right? And that is not awesome.
Yeah. No, and I think there's so many. I mean, we could spend 2 hours talking about issues from procurement to tribal and, like hubris, everything that prevents. You see organizations now that, hey, we've got security threat intelligence folks, maybe it's digital or physical, whatever. We can't get anybody to talk. So instead of like fixing the problem, we'll just hire one more person in the layer, or we'll hire, and I think there will come to a point where there'll be some decision points, or there'll be some forcing functions, I guess, if we want to use a military term, since we're talking cyber and Air Force, that will require that we unask ourselves.
Well, I think the relevance here is that it was Nicholas, and I can't remember, Chilan, who was hired as the Pentagon's first chief software officer, and he was saying that from an AI perspective, we have no fighting chance in 15 to 20 years, and almost right now it's a done deal. That's a pretty bold statement. Yeah, maybe he was pissed off or he didn't get whatever he wanted, but that's a pretty bold statement to push publicly. And he said, U.S. cyber defenses in some government departments were at the kindergarten level, and it's interesting. I worked in the in corporate environment in the healthcare space, and you just look at simple software updates, because every time you don't update your software, especially for your operating system, all the threats that brings, right? And I was in the hospital environment, and I looked at this ball of mess in cables that were attached to this this machine, these two machines that were running like some old version of Microsoft, like XP or 10 or something crazy, and you're like, what, this is all of our health information that every patient that goes through here, their health information is connected to that network that's running that system that is obsolete, because we can't do those patches fast enough, or we don't spend the money to secure. And so on some level, like when are we responsible for making sure that we're secure again in the cyberspace? We need to up our game.
Well, and what was it? 2020, we had a hack of a German hospital from a Russian cyber gang, and as a result of what you're talking about, they weren't able to redispatch. They had to send a patient that was coming to that hospital and redirect her to another hospital, and she died.
Right.
So, I mean, tell me that the threat isn't converged, or the threat isn't hybrid, and we don't. I mean, yeah, that's not an attack on a person. They didn't do it on purpose, but it's not to say.
It wasn't a directed or specific attack on a person, but it was there. So what does that look like, right? And it's a simple
and unintended consequences,
right?
And
the unfortunate thing is simple ones and zeros, right? But those ones and zeros are dollars, and that's what everybody's going to argue. Well, it's not that big of a deal. It's not worth the money until somebody gets hurt.
So I mean, an interesting space to watch. We will continue to report out on, interesting stuff in the digital realm that we think protectors need to be aware of, and push physical protection in some of the digital places that we're involved in as well. So I definitely, that's something that I'm watching. But
I think that's a space that we continue to watch. I mean, I think that is what we do now, right? We do watch that converged space, whether it's large scale, at the nation state level, non-state actors, or the criminal level, because that's
they all
have to do.
Terrorists, criminals, nation state, and transnational crime, they all kind of shop at the same Walmart at some point.
Right.
They might be looking for different things, but they're all kind of at the same Walmart, or they all kind of go to the same Starbucks. And
I'm thinking they probably shop like whatever the Chinese equivalent of it is. But I hear what you're saying.
But protectors need to do the same thing. I mean, we need to acknowledge, those folks that are wearing the digital hat or the physical hat, and stop. Should I go off on common operating information? No, we'll save
No,
that
you should not. You save that for next time.
another time.
Yeah.
So we have been doing a lot on Clubhouse lately, and when I say we, I mean that's something that you push a lot of and kind of coordinate. So that's kind of an interesting space that when it first started, we were kind of like, is this the place we want to be? There's a lot of great Clubhouse activities going on, especially for protectors. I mean, really, whatever you're interested in, there's a Clubhouse about it. I can't say
Yeah,
that
you want to know about, freaking string cheese. I'm sure there's a clubhouse about it, but
yeah,
whatever.
I can't. I mean, I don't know what the equivalent of caveat emptor for Clubhouse because it's free, but be careful sometimes. I've gone into a couple rooms thinking, oh, this will be an interesting geopolitical conversation, only to like rapidly leave 35 seconds later. But I would say most of the stuff that you and I are following or involved in is pretty well thought out and well done.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of it's well done. I would say the good thing and the bad thing about Clubhouse is that everyone can have a platform.
Yeah.
So just be careful what you're listening to. Or be careful what you believe, I guess. Really, that's really what it is. Like validate whatever it is that you're listening to and what you believe, because there's some kind of weird stuff going on out there.
And you got to be careful too, because there's that whole confirmation bias. As a protector, or if you're in the intelligence field, hell, anybody should always ask questions and try to get the other side of it, or try to get the same news or whatever you're getting from multiple sources, so you can ensure that it's
Absolutely.
not misinformation.
Absolutely.
But on Clubhouse, though, I mean, I kind of like it because we trying to talk more very strategic issues here, and that's kind of what the podcast started out as. And I know when we rounded up on Clubhouse, you said, hey, let's kick it down a notch to maybe the operational. And sometimes we do kind of get tactical, which is fun. And it's a good crowd, and it's always kind of the same. It's not it seems to be growing a lot lately, but there's always kind of the same crew that shows up, and it's always a good conversation.
Yeah, I think we're lucky because the folks that jump in are, experienced, smart, not afraid to share their opinions. It's not a self-licking ice cream cone or an echo chamber, and people will, give. We've got it. I wouldn't say international audience because even though we've had some requests for us to be international, but we've got a lot of folks that have a lot of international experience jumping in. So I think it's
well,
I think it's
I'm always amazed when I see Muzz online, because I think to myself, like, hell, what time is it for you, man?
Well, he's in Texas.
I thought he
He's
was.
he's a Texan.
Oh
Right?
man. Well,
Yeah.
I take that back. I was like impressed. I was like, hey, we got a dude from Australia
Yeah.
that's always
Yeah.
on. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. I did not know
And we
he's
have
a
had a
Texan.
request. We have had a request for like, hey, can you guys do at least just one a month that an international audience can join?
Yeah.
So we have to look at a time for that. But this week we're going to talk. So a couple weeks ago we talked about surveillance, the difference between surveillance and surveillance detection and the protective roles. This week we're continuing the conversation talking about surveillance, the difference between surveillance detection and counter surveillance. There's some people who will confuse or conflate those terms, and the stance is that they're not the same, and they both they have different roles, and oftentimes what we find is that people will, when they need to transition into surveillance, counter surveillance from surveillance detection, oftentimes they just don't know what to do. So we really this conversation this week will talk about the differences in the two, and hopefully how we're able to change gears to move into up and down from counter to surveillance detection and vice versa.
Surveillance is a tricky and like complex. I mean, if you think about it with a real, like if you have government teams or law enforcement teams or military teams doing it, how complex and deep it can become in terms of, if you're doing surveillance, and then if you're doing counter surveillance, well, if you're doing surveillance detection, and then you turn that to now we're doing counter surveillance. I mean, teams upon teams, and it
Can be very
sometimes, I mean,
complex.
it's mind blowing just to think like all the assets they might throw at somebody to say, we really want to know what this person is doing and where they're going and who they're seeing. So that's going to be good. I look forward to that conversation. It's going to be really good.
That'll be fun.
But yeah, I think that's all. I think that's all we had in the files for this October Shop Talk. We have been getting a lot of people that have been sharing the pod lately, and I really appreciate it, especially on LinkedIn. I've seen folks share. We've had some folks call it. Well, literally, we've had some folks call in. We've had some folks email in and give some comments as to some of the stuff we're doing. The Q&A episode, Chris, really, people continue to hit me up about that and say how much they appreciate it. And I've had a couple people already ask, like, when are the shirts going to be available? Just keep your eye on conversationsincloseprotection.com as we get that up and running, and we've got a few other surprises that we're looking to bring. But what else do you have to add tonight, Chris?
I got nothing.
I got nothing. I'm in Nevada.
I think we got we got a couple sponsors, so we're trying to freaking figure out sponsorship slots. So that's kind of fun.
Well, we're kind of at that point. I mean, we've been doing this for years, and we've had a few people just flat out ask, like, hey, what do we need to do? And, if we could, if this was all we got paid to do, we would have a media empire, my friend. But I think we're doing pretty good for 2 Muldoons and some microphones. You're the Muldoon number 1.
No, I am not.
You're Muldoon number 2. No, I'm sorry.
I'm
demotic.
demotic. You're the Muldoon. Exactly.
The demotic. Okay. Well, with that, we appreciate you joining us for October Shop Talk, where we get pretty and be on camera for you. Please think about sharing or think about rating us and giving some comments below, so it helps us understand what we can do better and helps other people find us. If you want to reach out to us, info@conversationsincloseprotection.com, or as always, the new one we're rolling out, and as always, we have the venerable protection talk at outlook.com that we see all the time. So with that,
do you think we could have got like a longer?
No, we should
close protection. You probably could have shortened it to like CICP.com. Maybe.
I tried to do that.
Or maybe Conversation in Close Protection Limited Liability Company.
Conversation Close Protection Limited Liability Company, based in, I don't know. Anyways, we're trying. All right. Again, this has been Conversation Close Protection. My name is Chuck Randolph, the Muldoon, and across the digital divide has been the demotic, not to be confused with the demonic, Mr. Chris Story. With that, wash your hands, watch your 6, be good to the trick-or-treaters, and keep your head down.
Actually, being good to him might be like scaring the crap out of him. But
that's exactly what I will do.
That is good times. That is good times.
You've been listening to an episode of Conversations in Close Protection. Email us at protectiontalk@outlook.com and find us on your preferred podcast platform. Please take a moment and consider rating us to help others find Conversations in Close Protection too. Look for us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and other social media spots. Conversations in Close Protection is brought to you by your hosts Chuck Randolph and Chris Story. Our engineering editor is the mighty Aaron Peck. Please remember that all opinions expressed do not represent those of any organizations or companies the hosts are affiliated with. This is Rachel saying watch your 6 and keep your heads down.